From 1950 to 2021, the global birth rate has declined by half. In the past 70 years, the world has observed a trend of declining fertility levels. Even in the world's poorest countries, the number of children being born has fallen on average. By 2050, it's predicted that over 3/4 of the world's nations will have fertility rates that are below the replacement rate of 2.1. In sociology, the replacement rate is the number of children that each woman must have on average to maintain a steady population. While we've seen many positive advancements in the world with a steady rise in economic growth over time, the falling rates of fertility is an observation that cannot be ignored. Having children is a choice that an increasing number of people are deciding against, but this has implications for society as a whole. So what is the cost of living childless? In 1950, the average family had around 5 children. In 2021, this number was around 2. Professor Matthias Doepke, an expert in family economics, has studied the key influences that have contributed to the declining birth rate. So what are some of the factors?
So it's an interesting question because the factors driving down fertility have really changed a lot over time. Fertility is of course a big decision, whether to have a child, how many children to have. It interacts with wider changes in society. If you go back further in history, most families were working in agriculture. They were growing things on a farm. They would have many children, and these children would essentially pay for themselves from a young age. They would start working, and actually many families used to get a large fraction of their income from working children, either informally on the farm or even having wage labor in a mine or in a factory. Now the focus of the family shifts towards thinking of children as something I want to invest in. I want to give them the best possible education so they can have a better life. And then we had this phase where women decided to go to work more, so participation went up. And that again made children more expensive because all of a sudden the time that you would have for raising children would compete with other opportunities in the labor market to contribute more to family income. So the way to think about this is that back in those days, and now I'm thinking of the 1950s, perhaps 1960s, that there was really 2 different life plans you could follow. You could follow a life plan of having a career. That would often mean having no family at all, maybe just a single child. Or having a plan of having a family, having 2 or 3 children, but that would often mean that career opportunities just would not be there for you. What is different today is that this divergence in life plans has gone away. So now the vast majority of women, just like the vast majority of men, want to do both things. They want to have a fulfilling work life and maybe a career. They also want to have a family.
So what are the differences in mindset from the baby boomer generation to today when it comes to having children?
Right, the baby boomer generation was still at the very beginning of the rise in female participation. Now, if you asked women, say in teenage years, of their expectations for their lives, many of them would have told you back then, and we have surveys that show this, that they would expect to marry, have children, and stop working at that time. So there was no expectation of combining both of these different things. And that is now totally different. If you ask young women and men now what their expectations are and what their aspirations and desires are for what kind of lives they want to live, you will see pretty much the same answers from the boys and from the girls. So everybody will say now that ideally they would like to have children. Not everybody, but large majorities of young people say that ideally in my life I would like to have a family. And also pretty much everybody, not exactly everybody, but the vast majority will tell you that they also want to have a fulfilling work life. They don't want to be completely dependent on somebody else. So these things have converged, and this is really a very different mindset from what the baby boomer generation had.
These days people will probably prioritise on other things, maybe their careers or things that they want to do before having children. Whereas me, I decided that even though we knew it was going to be a financial challenge, that was not going to stop me from the joy of having children. And so it's a decision that you make. And I think it's a decision that you decide, I was not going to let money or, stop us. We did what we needed to do to be able to provide for our children. They've turned out pretty well as far as I'm concerned. And so I think it's about your mindset and what you want to do and what you decide to do.
My mind straight away goes to money.
Yeah, finances.
Yeah, without money, you're gonna struggle. I grew up in a family where my dad, he worked, my mum wasn't working, she looked after all of us. Like living in council, living with my gran, being homeless, emergency accommodation, all that stuff. So I do not want my child to go through any of that stuff. So money is like at the top of my mind. So yeah.
And for me, again, it was the same because my dad was also the one that was working. My mum was staying at home with all of us. And then she ended up having to go to work. She ended up getting 2 jobs at the time. But even then, it was still not enough.
It seems with the newer generation, well, my generation and the younger generations, as far as I've seen and as I'm aware, they're like, there's not really point in me having any kids. It's just not feasible for me to support a child. So why should I bring one into the world if I can't support it the best I want to? The decision for me for not wanting children, I think it's been around since maybe I was 12-ish, like pretty early. I remember, and I was like, oh no, I don't want children. I don't want this. This seems very stressful. And then obviously from that point, everyone's like, oh, you'll change your mind. You'll change your mind. You know, just you'll get older and you'll change your mind. And I'm like, my mind's still the same, I'm afraid, everyone.
I want to have children. You want to have children. We both want to have children. It's the timing that's the issue. I think the world of today, everything's so expensive. So like going back to the money side, now childcare is an issue. You can't live on one income. My friend, I was just talking to him today, he's in the top 10% of earners in the UK. He said to buy a house, he'd need to have 100K. He's got a girlfriend. If they were both to get married and have children, that 100K still wouldn't support them. So you can buy a house, but you're gonna have an empty house. It's just gonna be you and your girlfriend. You're not gonna have a family.
There's an old saying in the Caribbean that says, it takes a village to raise a child. I strongly believe in it because the community that we grew up in basically raised us, disciplined us, and basically taught us how to be respectful to not only to ourselves but to our elders and our peers and so on and so forth.
What would the future look like for the current generation if the fertility rate continues on its current downward trend?
The one that we talk about the most, I think, is the impact of a low birth rate on population aging. If you have a low birth rate, that means, of course, you have fewer young people than old people. That becomes, over time, a problem for the government, for the state, because a lot of money the state spends is on old people. So support for pensions, support for healthcare, which older people need more of, becomes harder to sustain if you have relatively few people of working age. And so the fewer children you have, the more amplified this problem is going to get in the decades to come.
And we're not thinking about, actually, if we don't have children, how is that going to impact our future? There's not really going to be a place for us to have retirement properly because, wages is going to be impacted. But those people that are stuck in maybe the 9-to-5s, for example, their plan is to follow through with the retirement plan. Mm-hmm. And that age will only get older because people aren't having more children. It literally impacts everything.
Well, from my perspective, I've always kind of been of the mindset, as of recently, about, say, with the retirement age being pushed forward and stuff, I've kind of come to accept that I'm probably never going to retire. That's the harsh reality of it. Or it's going to be pushed to something really ridiculously high, like 80 or 90, God forbid 90. I feel like we would need younger people to help support and help make change. But then, with less people wanting kids, I can see how everything has a knock-on effect. And then with NHS waiting times and everything, I can see how everything is kind of just piled up into one big mess.
Now, that's a problem. It doesn't mean this problem is impossible to solve. No, of course, you can raise taxes, raise contributions. You can also raise retirement ages, as we're already doing in many countries. So there are some adjustments we can make to react to this new to this new reality. But it's certainly something that is ongoing, that is going to get more severe as we go along.
It's clear that a low birth rate has social and economic consequences for society. But how do we as society feel about these realities?
I just think it would be a shame, if there's just less and less children around, because they bring so much joy, don't they? And, not just bring us joy, but, they teach us so much as well. When I think about when I was a young parent, and then when I had the older two, I was a little bit more established, I learnt so much about myself. And so they taught me so much. They taught me about patience, how to give, and, to be a better person as well.
So yeah, family, if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I'd be, I live for my family, so family is essential.
because they really shape you as a person as well.
Yeah, family is the backbone of society.
Yeah.
That's the way I would put it.
But I do think personally that there's something uniquely depressing about being in a place where there's no young people. You know, if all the young people are gone, there's nobody left. There's just there's less of a sense of a future, less of a sense of growth. And I do think that that is just not a happy place to be. And I think we like to think about the community going on, our children being successful, the place we live in, thriving in the future. This is not going to be a reality for many people in the shrinking population.
So what can governments do to address the issues that arise from a low fertility rate?
In my opinion, I think it definitely falls more towards the services the government can offer to incentivise people to want kids. Because, as I say, from my small group of friends, a lot of them do say it's not that we would be against having kids. It's just there's not really enough support out there to make me want to have a child. Say, I know with childcare and stuff, you can get the bare minimum, but then of course I understand like why the government put these things in place to an extent, but I feel like there could be a better workaround that they could do.
Raise people's salaries, yeah? Incentivize commerce and business, you know, create a good economy so people aren't struggling for money.
If you do make these changes and you make, for example, childcare more available, if you make the workplace more flexible, if you make it more easy to go back between working in the office and being at home for a day because your child has a fever, you know, if you make this more available even to people in career positions as opposed to those who have maybe less ambitions, you will slowly come to a world, to a society where families and careers become more compatible. It's not going to be quick, you know, it might be 10 years or 20 years before you see large effects, but I think the examples we see around the world right now do show that it can be done, and it does show what steps we have to take.
The topic of the falling birth rate is one with many components, both in its causes and its ramifications on society as a whole. Based on future projections, it doesn't seem to be a trend that will change anytime soon. It's become increasingly important to think about how we build towards a society that supports people's various life plans, whilst creating a sustainable environment for our future.